Hey, it's Frank again. Welcome to another EKG video from you. This is part more of the basics here, so I'm going to go on with a couple of things here. I want to start about excitability. And excitability is the ability for the cardiac myocyte, the cell itself, to be able to receive a electrical impulse. The conductivity is the ability for the cardiac myocyte to be able to pass along this impulse, like conductivity for electricity, things of that nature, same kind of similarity. Automaticity is each cardiac myocyte has the ability to create its own electrical impulse on its own without having to follow one. Overdrive suppression is something important to understand because that whoever moves the fastest in the rate of the cardiac cell is the one that's going to take over, thereby suppressing the other ones, overriding it, right? Yeah. So let's move on. We go to the heart here, the atriums are here, ventricles are here. Let's talk about electricity here, right? Some more. SA node, sinoatrial node starts up right here. The first part of the impulse beats 60 to 100 beats. It is also known as the pacemaker of the heart. So I'm just going to put that right there. As you go down the internodal pathways and the backben's bundle, the impulse comes down this way and now to the AV node. And that's going to be at 40 to 60 beats a minute. AV node is also known as the gatekeeper. Down to the bundle of his. Separates it to the left and right bundle of branches. Down to the Purkinje fibers. Purkinje fibers, they'll have a rate of 20 to 40 beats per minute. So when we talk about overdrive suppression, right? We'll talk about it a little bit earlier. I want you to understand that whoever's beating the fastest, right? You see, 60 to 100 is going to be the SA node, right? So it's beating at that rate would override all of these two and any of their rates. So with that being said, everything follows suit from P wave to QRS complex, atrium to ventricle. It's going to follow suit in the same time frame instead of being segregated, right? And now, when you have a 60 to 100 beats going on there, if something occurs here that he's not functioning and being good to go, then AV node has to take over because he's the next fastest. Unless he can't do it, then the Purkinje fibers have to be able to take it over. I like to think of it like quarterbacks, right? He's your first string, second string, third string quarterback. And that's who I think of it as a string. You want to be SA node to fire all the time. You don't want to be sitting in that manner. So when we look at electricity, and I'm going to move it over to the actual beat that you can see in the EKG so you can kind of relate them together. So when you see an EKG, you can kind of understand what you're seeing. So we'll start with the P wave. And the P wave, as it comes up through here, that's where this first impulse comes across. And that is, remember, the electrical impulses are commands, right? And the contraction is the muscles of the cardiac following that command. So necessarily, if you see an electrical command, doesn't necessarily go have a pulse. So this is something I want you to understand as you go further on here. Let's talk about that really early on. So as that comes down through here, boom, you get that first impulse, first positive inflection, because it goes, as we all know, when electricity moves from negative to positive, it's going to be an upward positive deflection, right? When it moves from positive to negative, it's a downward deflection. So as it comes down here, it gets to the AV node. AV node starts its gatekeeper role, right? Hold on 1 second. I'm going to allow all the blood from the atriums to get squeezed and passively go into the ventricles, right? Because we want to move in as much as possible we can there before we get in and squeeze that out to the rest of the body, right? And it's going to be highly pressurized, right? So in order for us to do that, we have to follow along with what's called the Frank-Starling method, or mechanism, I should say. And then it's just simple. You stretch a rubber band as far as you can go without breaking it, and then you let it go. It has a lot of force to it, right? It's the same thing. You stretch out the ventricles with all that blood filling it, then it has a lot more force when you squeeze that in and pump that to the rest of the body. Just think of that when you come in over here. So the gatekeeper, the AV node, whatever little PRI interval, which I didn't draw a big enough one on there, and the P wave, so to start the Q, or to start the R wave, if the Q wave is not present. I want you to think of that section here, like from there to there, from there to there is going to be the one where that's the pause that's happening. It can be longer, it can be smaller, and we'll get into that a little further in other videos. So as we move next to the part here, I'm going to erase that real quick. Here's your Q, your R, and your S wave, right? So this next inflection right here is going to be the ventricles itself. And I just want to state this real quick because I forgot that. The depolarization is what has occurred from the cardiac cell, which caused that electricity to fire down that way. now we have a depolarization of the ventricles, right? And we're moving from negative to positive. So you got upward and downward deflections. But if you look at how the electricity passes through, it comes down like this and fires, right? So you think kidney fibers are like little hands squeezing that ventricles. Just a kind of little image in your head. And that's why you have different directions, deflections, because you're going from positive to negative, which I'll show you here in another video. Once you have that portion done, that's the big complex. That's why it's bigger than it is the P wave, because of the fact that it's a bigger ventricle, bigger muscle mass, right? And then if you look at the actual anatomy, the ventricles versus the actual heart, the ventricles are a lot bigger, and the heart, or the atrium, is a lot smaller. And then once that's complete, behind here that you cannot see is the repolarization of the atria, so that way it can fire again when it needs to go. But you can't see it because this is a big, large complex. You won't be able to see it behind here. J point is right here. J point just signifies the end of ventricular depolarization, right? And now we have to start the T wave, right? Which is the repolarization of the ventricles to be able to fire again. So let's go ahead and, now that I have that on here and you see that, I'm gonna go and do like a little zoomed in view of the T wave here real quick. So let's go with the T wave, right? Here's T wave. We're gonna split this in half. There's two different things happening here, right? So on this side, you gotta think of it this way. You have the absolute refractory period. Right? And the relative refractory period. On this side, no matter what you do, no matter how strong the electrical impulse is, you will not get a complex or any of the cardiac myocytes to follow along and create a complex or follow the command to do a contraction. Because not enough of them have repolarized to be able to follow that command, right? Once you hit this line, right about here, it's about halfway through the T wave, you come to the relative refractory period, right? Relatively enough, if you have enough, strong enough impulse, you can fire a complex through there, which creates the what's called the R on T phenomenon, which you'll hear a little later in the other videos that I have. But I want you to think this is why that occurs. So the irritability and the issue happens on this side when it's just enough of the cardiac cells are ready to fire to follow that command. So this is all I got for you right now, and I'll give you some more cardiac information in other videos. If you like this, like, share, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Thank you so much.